So thank you again for joining us this evening. I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Jessica Graham Morris, and a lot of you already know me. But for those of you who have not met me, I'm all things customer success at Taskfeed. And I'm part of a small team that works closely with our customers, providing them all the resources to help them achieve their outcomes for using Taskfeed. And this is the first in a series of webinars we're going to be conducting. And today we explore our core features and how some of our most successful customers use Taskfeed today. The second part of this webinar is more interactive and you can ask some questions. Now let's go over some housekeeping basics. You will receive the recording of the session by email tomorrow, so don't worry, you don't have to take notes. I have included a handout as well that has links and supporting material that we covered today. We're going to allow time for a Q&A in the second part of this webinar, where you can put your questions in the chat window that you see on the GoToWebinar. If we don't cover all your questions during this session, we will include those questions and answers in a follow-up email. We have a mixture of people in the audience here with us that we have invited. Some of you are what we call Taskfeed super users. The super users are responsible for managing all things Taskfeed. You'll be defining the process and creating Taskfeed templates. I'm going to talk a little bit about defining the process in this session, but we will cover how templates are created in a separate webinar that is actually a week from today. Super users are sometimes Salesforce system admins as well, who install and configure Taskfeed in your org. Then finally, we have the end users. And an end user is anyone using Taskfeed on a daily basis as part of their work. In some cases, the same person is both super user and end user. Throughout this webinar, I will refer to these roles a lot so you can know where you fit in the context of what I'm showing. There's more information and resources available at help.taskfeedapp.com and also on our YouTube channel. So let's go for the agenda. In this session, I'm going to cover what is Taskfeed and how it supports the customer onboarding and other similar processes and playbooks. Some of you have not installed Taskfeed yet, so we'll briefly go over setting it up. Next, we're going to show you how our customers use core features of Taskfeed and some best practices and tips. And finally, we'll take your questions and answer as many of them as we can. So let's get started. So I know from conversations that I've had with many of you that much like myself, your work involves customer-facing activities, whether you're onboarding a new customer or delivering an implementation. This process involves constant back and forth between you and your client, as well as updating your team, your boss, and other departments. So most Taskfeed customers are a recurring revenue business. This means our job is not finished after a sales deal is closed. In fact, it's just getting started. In Salesforce, the buyer journey often begins as a lead, then qualified leads become an active account and an opportunity. Then, successful opportunities will be closed and won. Sales will hand over to customer success. So these departments will shift over time, but the customer is still the same and they expect a seamless journey throughout. So where does Taskfeed fit in all of that? Well, Taskfeed helps us continue the journey beyond opportunity closed and won. In order for you to provide that seamless and consistent experience for your customer and for you to be able to measure the success of each project, it's important to have a best practice playbook. Whatever the specifics of your process, there are themes which are universal. So here's an example of a customer onboarding journey. From the customer's perspective, this is a continuous flow that should work seamlessly from sales to customer success and beyond. Many customers come to us with a journey in mind. Some are already very detailed in terms of processes and roles involved, while others need a little bit more digging into. If you haven't drawn out your journey yet, it's a very valuable exercise, and it's something that is so helpful when we're planning how Taskfeed is going to support that journey. Our most successful customers, they use Taskfeed this way, with at least one process mapped to it. A lot of our customers are software as a service startups experiencing an accelerated growth. So 12 months ago, they were onboarding maybe 10 customers a month. And today, they're able to onboard 10 times that using a process that is supported by Taskfeed, where they can allocate the right people for each project and measure their success from Salesforce. Our customers find that it brings clarity and transparency to repeatable processes, such as customer onboarding. Each playbook will be a Taskfeed template that contains a consistent set of tasks and points of contact. Points of contact will be things like kickoff calls, meetings, follow-ups. Tasks can be dependent on one another. They can have a targeted timeline, so you can compare it to what actually is delivered for each client each time. Having all of that information within Salesforce is important because you can measure it together with all of the other data that you've been collecting about your customers so far. So before our demo, I will quickly go over how Salesforce admins can install and set up Taskfeed in your org for those of you who have not installed Taskfeed yet. Taskfeed is available from the App Exchange. Installing Taskfeed and any App Exchange product requires Salesforce administrator permissions. So if you don't have those, the system admin in your org will do that for you. I have included a link with more information on those permissions in the deck that you'll receive. From our page on the App Exchange, you're going to click the Get It Now button. And you might have to log in with your Salesforce credentials if you haven't done that already on the App Exchange. Next, you will select if you want to install in a sandbox or in a production environment. As best practice, we recommend installing Taskfeed in a sandbox environment first. There's a free 30-day trial period after you install. You can add up to 15 users to this trial. If you need more, just let us know. These 15 users don't need to install Taskfeed separately. That's 15 users in the same org, the same trial. After the trial, you can add more users as active users. Your admin will assign a Taskfeed license and a Taskfeed permission set to give access to anyone in your org who needs to use Taskfeed. And there's a section on our help that will guide new users on how to get around Taskfeed for the first time, and super users how to install and set up. So all of the links are provided to you on the handout. So now let's go for our live demo, shall we? So when you first install Taskfeed, it looks pretty much like this. And there's a few custom objects that come with Taskfeed, depending on your permission sets. You may not be able to see all of them, but everybody has access to the main Taskfeed tab, which looks exactly like this. And you're not seeing any boards when you first install, but after a little while, when there's a lot of boards that you have created and your team members have also done that, it will look more like this. Great. So let's go over here and start with the task inbox, which is a great place for you to start. So everyone gets a task inbox, and this is a great place for you to see what's on your plate that week or that day. It's organized in chronological order, and it shows all of your tasks across all boards that you're a member of. So if you think there is something particularly important that you want to remember, you can put a star next to it. And the task is going to the starred section of your inbox. So it's easy for you to reference. And you can also mark something as complete, see more details on the side over here. I'm going to create my first board and create a task so you can see what each of these things mean in the context, okay? this is the side menu. So all you have to do is press this arrow over here to access the side menu and create a board. I'm going to give my board a name. So let's go for, and then I'm going to select a board type. So board types, out of the box, you will see team and project. They define the kind of process that you're dealing with. So an example that our customers use as custom board types are onboarding, implementation, sales, marketing. And your Taskfeed administrator is going to be able to add more board types for your org later on after they install it. So I'm going to select project for now. And out of the box, you will also be able to relate Taskfeed boards to an account and an opportunity. So I am going to select an existing account to relate this project to. And I can also add an opportunity. Great. So now I'm going to create my board. Because I'm the owner of the board, as I'm the one creating it, by default, nobody else will be able to see it unless I share this board with other users by adding them as team members. So I'm going to add a board team member now, and I'm going to give them a role. And this is not a Salesforce role in the role hierarchy. This is a role in Taskfeed and in this particular project. The same way that board types can be customized, you can also customize roles. So you can add other roles that make sense in your organization. An example would be a customer success manager, an implementation manager, things like that. Out of the box, these are the ones you're going to see. So now let's go ahead and create our first task. These are the lists that you will see on the board out of the box. Lists are placeholders for your tasks where they should be living in. So you will see not started, in progress, waiting, and complete out of the box. Just like board types, also customizable. So I'm just going to add an example of a task here. Okay, you can add more detail. You can select the list you want. I'm the owner by default, and I will cover categories in a little while. But categories are basically labels that help you define tasks and put them in categories. Things like, for instance, an event. So if I have an event related to this task, like a kickoff call, I can create a category and label event. It can have different colors, or maybe it's something more like a status, like high priority, or a client action item, something that I want my client to know that it's for them. So that's what a category would be. So out of the box, you don't have any, but your Taskfeed administrator can go ahead and do that for you. So I'm going to set a start date because I'm going to start doing this today, and I have until maybe Friday. And you can add a little bit of detail too. So great. So now I have created my first task, but in reality, most people are not going to create every task on the board manually to track their projects. When they create a board, ideally, there will already be a series of tasks prepared for you depending on the type of process you're creating or type of project. So this is why I was covering a little bit of how that process and playbook maps to Taskfeed. Your Taskfeed administrator will prepare separately a template that will map to each process that you have in your organization, whether it's an onboarding playbook or an implementation, and it can be mapped to different products that you sell and segments. So once you have all of that, you can have, when you create a board, that template will already exist with your board. So I'm going to show you an example of a template that I'm going to import manually by clicking Edit next to the board name. And this is an active template that I have. I will have a little preview and I'll confirm, and this will be imported. So now I have created a series of tasks automatically. And as you can see, there are already dates on them because I set those ahead of time on my template, or my Taskfeed administrator did that for me. It has also been assigned to different people. Because I gave my board team member a role, I also have a role as project manager on this board. Any tasks that were defined with these roles for people to check off have been assigned to us because of our role on this board. So for instance, I have not added a pre-sales consultant to my board yet. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And as you can see, because I gave her a role, she is already added automatically to any tasks that require that role. Okay, so this is my due date over here. When I click on my task, I will see more information about it. I can scroll down, add checklist items if I like. Great. And I can also assign a checklist item to somebody else. Great. So now she is also added as a contributor on my task. Here. Another thing that is very helpful for us to do with Taskfeed is to log time against tasks. So by logging time, as you can see, there are tasks that have 1 hour remaining. Over here, 2 hours remaining. On your template, you can define estimated hours, which is a number of hours that you believe in your organization that it takes for each task to be completed. And then your users can go ahead and log time against each task. So let's see over here. Let's say that's in progress. I'm going to click over here because this task also is assigned to me. I'm going to log time against it. And let's say I have spent half an hour on this task. And recently we had a customer who asked us, what are the units of time that we can log time against a task? So we have that on our help documents now. It will show you all of the units of time that you can log on a task. The remaining estimate will be calculated automatically, and you can add a description too. So there you go. So the advantage of logging time against tasks is that over time you will get analytical data that will tell you how your projects are performing overall and which tasks are taking longer than expected. So it's extremely useful to see if you're making the best use of your resources. So for instance, we have over here on our dashboards So out of the box, we all get a sample Taskfeed dashboard, and we also get a folder full of reports that have Taskfeed information that is helpful to us. So obviously you can build on top of those reports with your own data that is relevant to you. But things like time and open tasks by owner and time recorded by month, and this is why it's very helpful for us to log time against each task. So now I am ready to take some questions. Okay, so we have a question. Can you update an active board with a template Or do you have to start with a template? Ideally, you have to start with a template, but as I showed you, you can also layer a template when you have started with a board. So let me show you how to do that. When you create a template, there is a reference field, and this reference needs to be unique. Also, when you create, so let me put that into context for you really quick. Let's go to Taskfeed Templates. So when you first upload a template, you can relate it to a board type. By relating to a board type, it means every time you create a board that has that type, it will automatically import the template. So instead of importing the template like I did in the demo earlier, it will already load that for you when you first create that board. However, you can also upload templates and make them active like I did and not relate them to any board type. So you can create smaller templates that are, let's say, only a list of certain tasks that you know are only applicable in certain situations. As long as those references are completely unique, you can add a template on top of an existing board. So if I go back to Taskfeed, I wouldn't be able to add the same template over to this board, but I can, if I had a blank board and I forgot to add my template and I have templates that are not related to any board type, I can go ahead and import it. So this is how I would do it. Will the tasks inside of Taskfeed replace or sync with the tasks inside of Salesforce account record? Okay, so Salesforce tasks have no relationship at all to Taskfeed tasks. They are completely separate. So it's important to keep that in mind, that if you will be using Taskfeed, to not expect Salesforce tasks to have any relationship. So one way that you can track tasks the way that you would do in Salesforce if you're now a Taskfeed user is to have a board type that is not necessarily related to specific opportunities and accounts. So you could create a private board type where you can still manage your tasks that are related to your work and keep that all inside Salesforce and still manage it. So much like these boards, you don't have to relate them to an account or an opportunity, but you can still keep track of it. So would you like me to show you how to create a Taskfeed category, for instance? All right, let's go do that. So Taskfeed categories are managed from the Taskfeed category object in Salesforce that comes when you download Taskfeed. So it's over here. As you can see, I'm going to create a new category and I'm going to call it event. And I'm going to use this category for my calls with my customers, my meetings, anything that is really event related. And you can add a color to it, and it can be a CSS compatible color. So as you can see here, and you can just Google, and there are lots of sites, and we have those sites for you on our help documents, or you can simply type something like this, blue. Great. So you can add a description, and these will be great. So I'm going to create another one, and I'm going to call it client action item. All right. So now when I go to my Taskfeed board, great. I am going to put a category for my kickoff call. So the fun part is that when you go on our plan view, which is one of our views, and it's much like a Gantt chart, that kickoff call now has a little color, as you can see. And this is a great way to identify. So back on the board view, one thing that I like to do, and a lot of our customers do the same, is, for instance, I've had my internal handover, sent my agreement, I scheduled my kickoff call, I'm ready for my kickoff call, okay? I'm going to talk to my customer, we're having an agreement, we're talking about the timeline. I am going to set a baseline over here. Set baseline. What is the baseline? The baseline is a visual guideline of for your project, for your plan. So for instance, when I go over here on my plan view, I'm going to show my baseline, and it's this green line over here on the top. It's also with my other tasks. And so now you and the customer, you're aware of that. This is my timeline agreed. So let's say, for instance, that I sent my implementation agreement. My customer is taking a little bit long to bring that back. So let's say that instead of those 3 days, it took them a little bit longer. As you can see, the baseline has turned red. And you can see the difference. This was what it was supposed to happen, and this is what's going on now. So all the downstream tasks are affected by it. From the board view, you can see how many days your project is behind. Over time, this is very valuable to get that variance. So remember when I was saying that during my kickoff call, we agreed on the timeline? Well, how can we do that? Instead of me showing my customer a PDF version of the project, what we can do is use a great feature called external sharing. External sharing will be configured ahead of time by your Salesforce administrator, and once that is done, we can go over here, edit the board, advanced options, and select external sharing to public. This will allow me to share my board with my customer. When I click on this globe over here, copy the link, and I will send it to my customer. I will open this link in a new tab, but I will also put it on the chat icon so you can see for yourself. And that is the link. As you can see, your customer will be able to view exactly the way that you're viewing. They can view it by the due date view, which shows them in a chronological order everything that is happening. They can also see the plan view, and they can choose to show the baseline. Okay, so they can view this. They can even click on a task and see more information about it. That's great. They can also see everything from a table view. As you can see, that category that I had just created, they will also see as a label. So when I label tasks as client action items, you can say, hey, everything that you saw as client action items, that's for you to do. You're still responsible for checking those tasks off because after all, you're the project manager, but it gives you and your customer a lot of accountability. And this is something that recently we had a chat with one of our customers. They said, we use external sharing exactly for this reason, because we have proof of concept and there are things that are for our clients to do. And when we agree on that timeline and we share the plan with them, it makes them accountable as well. What you see is what you get. And this is the timeline we agreed, and now you know what's depending on you for you to do. So I think it's a great way for you to collaborate with your customer as well as collaborating with your team. So back over here, there are things that maybe you don't want to share with your customer because it's not relevant to them. So for instance, if I want them not to see things that I need to schedule, I can go ahead, for instance, over here, and ahead of time, before I share the plan with my customer, I'm going to mark this task as internal only. This is updated in real time, so you will be able to see that now it's no longer here. So let's compare the two. Yep, scheduled team workshop, not there. Another thing that I haven't shown you yet is your settings. So when you're a Taskfeed user, everyone has access to your settings. You can go over here and you can personalize your notifications. So things like the daily summary, which is a small summary of all the tasks that you have on your plate today and upcoming. You can receive that by email, should you choose to. Also, when you're assigned as a task owner, you can receive that by email or in-app as well. When you're assigned as a task contributor, when a task is ready for you to work on, when a task is completed, when someone posts a chatter post to your task, when someone puts a chatter comment, and when someone replies. That's great. And also, after external sharing has been configured, you can sync Taskfeed tasks to an external calendar application. That means you can paste this URL over here that you will receive for your own tasks, and you can view it in places like Google Calendar. It will give you a view-only ability from Google Calendar, but it's very helpful. So you can save your preferences. And let's go back to Taskfeed and I'll show you what the in-app notifications are. When you get a notification, you will see a little bell over here. So this would be where you would be receiving your in-app notifications. So, is there a way to hide certain tasks by default? Yes, absolutely. You can do that from the template, and I will show you. We're going to talk more about the templates next week, but let me show you an example of a Taskfeed task that can be marked as internal only. So this is a preview of our templates. So when you create a task template, all you have to do is add a column over here, and you can say internal only. And the values will be true or false. True will mark tasks by default as internal only. False will be no, they're public. So you can do that ahead of time. So when you create that board and it has that template with that set of tasks, you already know which tasks are internal only by default. So another thing that I can show you is the different views you get from the board menu here on the side. As you can see, when you click, once you have created lots of boards, so from the board menu, you will be able to see recent boards by default. You can also see my boards. These are boards where you're a team member, or you can see boards that you own, okay? Then you also have task list views, okay? And those can be custom list views that you can create in Taskfeed tasks. And we can cover those in more detail in our next Getting Started with Taskfeed session. And you can also get board list views. These will be over here. So you can see boards in progress. You can create custom boards in Taskfeed boards like implementation boards, onboarding boards, things like that. If I have all boards and I go over here on my board view, I can select certain boards that I want to see. So for instance, and then I can add another board. So for instance, I also want to see this one. And let's go ahead and see this implementation board as well. So every time you click add, you'll be able to see more boards from this view. Now, oh, I don't want to see this board anymore. Let's go ahead and remove. So now let's say I want to delete a board. if I'm the owner of the board, I'm going to go ahead, go to Taskfeed Boards. I'm going to check this. I'm going to see boards from my list view. Go ahead and delete. It's the same thing in Classic. It just looks different, but it works exactly the same way, and that board is deleted. So I'm also going to show you what happens when I create a board that already has a template related to it. So remember, when I created a board earlier, it didn't have any templates yet, and I imported a template manually. So let's say this board over this template is related to the project board type. Gonna save that. Great. So when I create a board now and it has the project type, you'll see what happens. So that's mine. Ta-da! You see how it already had even my labels that I had set earlier. Client action item, event, just like magic. Because I had these categories already on my template, because I had created those categories separately, now I can see them on my board. So let's add somebody else as my pre-sales consultant. Great. So you can see the timeline and you can see the different colors for your categories. You can also move tasks around. Let's say now I don't want my implementation to have a dependency because my agreement has changed. You can remove dependencies from tasks just like that. So from your template, you're going to set dependencies as it makes sense to your playbook. And this is how you can remove them or adjust them. So I hope this webinar has been helpful and a great first session for us to get started. We will be conducting more webinars like this, especially our Getting Started one. And next week, we'll be talking about our Taskfeed templates, how they work in the template, how we can use them, and what are the values and formats for each of them. You can find resources online on help.taskfeedapp.com. You can also ask your questions on the chat icon in the Taskfeed tab. You can find more support in the YouTube channel, and the link is all on the handout. And you can also email us with your questions at support@taskfeedapp.com. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.